Howdy. With a massive lineup of characters and TV shows, it's practically inevitable that we ended up with a tsunami of licensed Nickelodeon games. Interestingly though, Nickelodeon seems particularly keen to cross their characters over into each other's worlds, making for some really wild combinations of characters in their games.
You're joining our side?
Some good games, some, well, let's look at them together and find out. Let's check out the top 5 best and worst Nickelodeon games. Also, I understand some people may have nostalgia for these titles, so please excuse me if I didn't like one of your favorites. Hopefully my perspective might still at least be interesting. I've also excluded most games with only SpongeBob in them, as I already did and thoroughly enjoyed doing a best and worst SpongeBob games list. I'll link it here in case you hadn't seen it and are curious. Anyway, on to the countdown. For the 5th worst, Nickelodeon Kart Racers. I tried. I really did try to like this one. I thought, hey, Nickelodeon's absolute final console game that I could find. I bet they've really put their A game into this. I bet they've taken on board all our modern technology to make an exciting, cheeky, charm-packed experience. Well, in just about every way possible, this game seriously underwhelmed me. I mean, obviously, we both know it's a Mario Kart cash-in from the get-go, but that's okay. SpongeBob Lights Camera Pants was a Mario Party cash-in, and that turned out to be lots of fun. But Nickelodeon Kart Racers is the most lifeless Mario Kart clone I've ever played. To start with, my biggest pet peeve with this game is that they made it nearly unplayable with this music. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this music is horrendous. On every single stage, it's intrusive, it's obnoxious, and it sounds like these constant loud horns blaring into my ears. Could we at least get some good commentary and quips from the Nickelodeon team? Nope. The game lacks any voice acting. Over the years, Nick games have actually been really good in bringing back their original actors to voice the characters. So by 2018, we can generally assume in a big budget HD PS4 Nickelodeon game, they would at least bring back the voice actors. But instead, for some reason, they seem to think a constant eerie dead silence on the racetrack would be more appealing. In terms of gameplay, there's barely any special moves, the tracks are surprisingly lifeless, and the graphics look choppy enough to be fresh out of a mobile game. They certainly don't deserve to be on a PS4 system. The characters mostly have that dangerous for under 3s plastic HD sheen, but that somehow makes the game look even uglier. A story, you ask? Ah, you jest well. There is no story. This is Nickelodeon kart racing. We should just be grateful for stable controls. As for the good points, well, as I said, the controls are fairly responsive, and each racer gets a good amount of customization available to their cars. And I kind of like some of the level design choices, like this area where you're driving through slime. As much as I've never understood Nickelodeon's weird obsession with mucus-colored liquid, it's at least doing something slightly different. Some people may have enjoyed this one, and if so, I understand. But jeepers, I recommend you play Mario Kart or Sonic All-Stars Racing instead. Just something with some life to it. I can assure you, there's plenty of other Nickelodeon games where you can get your fill of the Nicktoon characters. And I think the 5th best Nickelodeon game is SpongeBob featuring Nicktoons, Globs of Doom. Okay, case in point, why does a game from 2008 look so much better than a game made 10 years later? Jeepers, kart racers felt lazy. Anyway, moving on. I'm impressed by Globs of Doom. The story of this one is to the point, but it also melds this bizarre collection of Nickelodeon characters together surprisingly naturally. The basic story is that SpongeBob and Squidward see a rain of orange slime from the sky that turns anyone it hits into zombies. So, Jimmy Neutron returns once again to take them to Volcano Island. As the 4th Nicktoons game, I imagine he's getting pretty used to these insane setups by now. At Volcano Island, we meet the rest of the Nicktoons cast, including Danny Phantom, the evil syndicate, and look who it is.
Me and Dan will help too. You're joining our side?
Though Zim's the main one looking a little bit off. He didn't transfer to 3D as well as I'd hoped. So apparently all the Nicktoons worlds are in danger from this slime, aka the Globs of Doom. So the Nicktoons join forces to stop the Morphoids, a gelatinous alien race that threatens all the Nick worlds. So we need to collect special robot parts from each Nicktoons world to finish the ultimate robot that can defeat the globs. Apart from Zim, most of these characters look pretty decent for 2008 graphics. Unlike a lot of other Nick games, there's less of that plastic cheap feel to the graphics, and the characters look pretty authentic to their 2D counterparts. And also unlike a lot of Nick games, the color scheme here doesn't feel too saturated or garish. Nicktoons Unite, the original in the series, had this ugly green fog to it that seemed to envelope everything, making for a pretty unpleasant color palette. And the world also felt more lively to me than Nicktoons Unite did. SpongeBob and the crew often jump in with their original voice actors with quotes at just the right times without ever getting too repetitive, and most of the sound effects have a nice softness to them. And seeing these characters together actually feels authentic enough for it to be an actual crossover episode. Like the last 3 games, this one's a beat-em-up 3D platformer, and fortunately, there's definitely been an improvement from Nicktoons Unite in controls responsiveness. If Nicktoons games can get SpongeBob's karate chops and his iconic floaty ballerina jumps to feel smooth, more fun platforming tends to follow suit. You collect coins from defeated enemies in order to buy upgrades to increase attack, teamwork, or special weapons powers. You know, the usual jazz. I always appreciate the option of a co-op play too, which means if you want, you can play with any family or friends. There's also way more variety to the scenes than something like Plankton's Robotic Revenge. There's different sections of Bikini Bottom, Danny Phantom's town, dungeons, labs, and an endless cavalcade of slides for some reason. The minus is, despite the variety of levels and characters, an experienced gamer will probably find the less challenging gameplay gets a bit monotonous after a while. But I think many younger viewers particularly will find Globs of Doom a perfectly serviceable 3D platformer, with plenty of that Nicktoons heart and just enough complexity to keep it fun.
Do I have a sign on me that says Goo Sponge? What's happening?
And for the 4th worst, The Legend of Korra game. I originally live-streamed this game for charity back in 2015, and I just got so frustrated. I continually died over and over, or got lost within the endless labyrinth of barrels and awkward jump puzzles on the first freaking level. Do you like continually punching the same generically reskinned guy in a mask over and over again for 5 hours straight, interspersed with disorienting temple run minigames on Naga? Well, I don't understand your tastes, but at least you'll enjoy the Legend of Korra game far more than I did. I should make it clear, The Legend of Korra is among my favorite cartoon series, except for season 2. And seeing it finally get a game, only for it to be too monotonous and frustrating for me to finish, really cut me deep. The story's basically, there's an evil old guy chi blocker doing bad stuff, and Korra happens to lose all her bending powers to this evil old guy chi blocker at the start of the game. How convenient for gameplay tutorials.
I'm afraid your bending is blocked, Avatar. You won't be able to fight your way out of this.
Obviously, the 2014 graphics are looking much less pixely, and are a major step up from the early 2000s graphics, but in this case, only on that more superficial level. That being said, I did feel her martial arts combat and bending did look fairly similar to the show, but the backgrounds in particular are pretty featureless and bland. I thought I'd be excited running around Republic City, but what a bore! The levels are lacking so much of the environment, the liveliness or bustle of the original cartoon. But the combat is definitely the biggest plus of the game. When Korra is bending the elements against the guy in a mask and his 100 identical twin brothers, it does feel satisfying, and it's very fluid controls, letting us pretty seamlessly jump between the bending powers right amidst the combat. Button mashing's actually kind of fun here. They also brought back Korra's original voice, and to me, she sounds like she's fresh out of Season 2, which does make sense since it's set 2 weeks after Season 2, but it doesn't really matter because she barely has a semblance of story to work with anyway. She's mostly reading out internal monologues and almost never interacting with other people.
If that old man's in the spirit world, then I'm headed to the spirit portal.
Except, of course, the dreaded guy in a mask that Korra runs into again and again and again.
I might not be able to bend, but my fists still work.
Personally, I got 2 hours into this game, and I was still on the first dang level, stuck in the same stupid corridors fighting those generically reskinned guy in masks. But hey, at least it was for a charity livestream and we raised some money for the kids. So at least something good came out of Cora's disappointing dip into gaming. The fourth best Nickelodeon game is Nickelodeon 3D Movie Maker. I definitely have a soft spot for this one. This and the original 3D Movie Maker were actually how I first started making movies when I was 7. I'd show you some, but fortunately, Josh the Movie and Josh vs. Baddie...
I'm going to get you, Baddie.
Yes, that was really the name of my villain. He was a giant skeleton. Josh Combat...
It's Baddie.
I am Baddie.
The Return of Josh and Josh in Video Game City
I'm Josh. Welcome to Video Game City.
were lost to time, and me burning the CDs in a furnace. Consider yourself lucky. But basically, Nickelodeon 3D Movie Maker is exactly what it sounds like. A game where you can make simplified 3D movies. We get to use 12 Nicktoons characters, including Rocco, Ren and Stimpy, and Ickis, and 11 different 3D scenes they can move around in. Obviously, the 1996 graphics have aged really badly, but some of us 90s kids had so much fun with this. There are even new movies on forums being made to this day. With Nick 3D, I made Ren and Stimpy the Movie, Revenge of Mean Toast Man, or Our Real Detention, starring Our Real Monsters.
Go out there and scare, and give me a reason to keep on living.
Sure, they were stupid, they had super limited dialogue to what the voice actors gave in the samples. They were slow and they didn't make much sense, but this software had me and many others making these silly movies and getting creative for years. If not for this game and the original 3D Movie Maker, well, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you. And frankly, some people got really creative with these and put countless hours into them. There was an entire online community of Nickelodeon 3D movies when the web was first starting, back when we had to dial up on a 56k modem. Though sadly, Ren and Stimpy, Revenge of Mean Toast Man, never got accepted onto the site. Understandably though, it kinda sucked.
Here you go.
And I think the third worst Nickelodeon game is iCarly 2, I Join the Clique. Oh, ain't this just peachy? A game based on managing friend requests and badly interfaced clunky social media pages, while running errands for people with superstar complexes. Well, for what I think is people anyway. I mean, they could be gnomes or white-skinned octopus monsters, and I probably wouldn't be able to tell either way. I mean, even if a kid wants that badly to meet Carly in game, does this even remotely look like Miranda Cosgrove? It looks like The Sims 1 had bred a race of weird, creepy potato people. The chibi sweatshop knockoff version of creepy potato people. Even the menus don't work well and look far more like scraps of crudely written paper with black marker. I guess the game plays a bit like a watered down version of Animal Crossing, except it's far closer to an annoying tween drama with none of the charm, liveliness, or intrigue of the original show. We basically just helped Carly and Sam build up their web show by continually running stupid fetch quest errands for them.
I mean, why should we do the heavy lifting when we got the new kid here? Alright, new kid, you heard the lady. Get out there and get sprucing.
With some mundane minigames spliced in between. And don't forget the In Your Face website, and yes, it is exactly what you're thinking. You can add anyone you meet and get predetermined updates about their lives. Because apparently one Facebook feed just wasn't enough. Clearly the teens of today need more melodrama in their lives. Fun fact though, apparently there's a surprisingly big speedrunning community for this game. The idea of tolerating this game more than once, yet alone getting good enough to speedrun it. Yeesh, there are certainly stronger-willed humans out there than me. And for the third best, Fairly Odd Parents, Shadow Showdown. I think fans of Fairly Odd Parents will really dig this one. Everything gets a solid B+, from the easy controls to the on-point voice acting from Cosmo, Wonder, and Timmy.
You don't want Jorgen von Strangle to hear you, just in case this is our fault.
I'm not scared of Jorgen von Strangle.
Are you sure, Puny Fury?
All the characters shine here just as much as they did in the show, which is refreshing. It's another 3D platformer, and there's plenty of world-building little details and voicing throughout the platform levels too. The trio traverses the pages of comic books, alien space stations, and even the fairy world itself. And there's a good sense of character to each world rather than feeling repetitious. There's no doubt this game retains that oddness that the original Fairly Odd Parents show had. To get through, the usual 3D platforming proceeds. You'll need to jump, slide, push crates, and stomp on enemies to succeed. A nice extra gameplay element I liked was having an entire button dedicated to bringing Cosmo and Wanda up for a chat. They offer little insights if you get stuck from area to area.
Remember, kid, don't fall out tall buildings. It hurts.
Each area also has 3 world-exclusive wishes to help Timmy advance through the level, if you can find the 3 wish stars in the level. Cosmo and Wanda certainly get creative with these. The first thing you may notice is a smooth and colourful art style. Unlike a lot of Nickelodeon games, Timmy, Wanda, and Cosmo pretty much look like their 3D equivalents without much compromise. The story here is that someone's stolen the royal jewel in Fairyland, which apparently means no fairy can now cast magic without first collecting fairy wish stars. So it's up to Timmy, Wanda, and Cosmo to restore magic to the Fairyland. A bit like the Simpsons game, this actually feels authentic enough to be an actual TV special of the show. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the Fairly Odd Parents series myself, so I probably wouldn't play much of this, but I think it's well worth the time of any Fairly Odd Parents fans out there. And the second worst Nickelodeon game is Nickelodeon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Most people I've spoken to tend to agree that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Nickelodeon adaptation is really something special for the franchise, packing both action, witty writing, and a bit of character development and nuance amongst the Turtles. Unfortunately, Nickelodeon's game version of the Turtles certainly does not hold up in gameplay, and your eyes may very well likely glaze over before you finish the first 10 minutes. The banter's okay, and the full voice cast of the Turtles are there.
The band! They're gone! Well, there's only one thing to do. Movie night or video game night.
But the gameplay is so simple, you can pretty much just mash Y continually until every foot soldier you face is down. Then you can slightly edge right to move to the next batch and rinse and repeat. I mean, you could press X to throw some foot soldiers, but the Y button does the job just fine. I did like that there were some upgrades available though, letting you spend some in-game currency to increase your damage or learn new combos. Again though, the Y button will get you through them all, so why bother? And we have got to talk about this companion AI. I mean, it's just truly the pinnacle of terrible. Those 3 turtles following behind us? They'll mostly just watch dumbfounded as you dispatch everything on screen. That, and they'll steal any healing items you might find. Not that you'll be needing them. Again, just keep mashing Y. And very occasionally, on the night of a full moon when the planets align, one of them might actually very slowly do an attack. Wow! It's like the game's actually taunting me, saying, hey, you know those 3 turtle buddies? I could let them help you. But instead, I decided to put them in a permanent stupor where their occasional flailing seizures might accidentally bump an enemy. In fact, even walking too far is too massively complicated for this AI. If you walk too far away, they'll just give up, get lost, and reappear out of the sky. I guess Nickelodeon's TMNT game is technically Ninja Turtles, but after this disaster, you may really be wishing it wasn't. And for the second best,
Now that's just outright.
Nicktoons MLB. Okay, I normally don't give 2 cahoots about sports games, but Nicktoons MLB on the Xbox 360 feels genuinely lively, and it absolutely feels like I'm seeing all these Nicktoons characters off the TV screen and thrown into a baseball field. To me anyway, it takes genuine effort and talent to make baseball somewhat interesting. And if you do actually like baseball, I think this has everything a sports game should have. I mean, for starters, we have Gurr sharing sports commentary with what sounds like Tom Kenny.
It remains 1-0.
And Gurr is of course acting exactly as you'd expect. I mean, somehow they even managed to get Jim Cummings into the studio for this, for Powdered Toast Man.
That it would come to this.
And to a dorky non-sports dweeb like me, they actually explain how to play baseball reasonably quickly and well. I could follow along well enough, and I didn't have any problems understanding the basics. Bikini Bottom is feeling lively while Ren is pitching to Aang batting. Where else but Nicktoons MLB? Unlike the Wii version, there's about 24 different Nicktoons to choose from for your team, and each one feels as vibrant and real as the last.
Sandy Cheeks!
I'm hotter than a hickory smoked sausage.
I really appreciate the amount of detail here. Even the body language of the characters, the random quips and lines, the pure polish of this presentation. The Wii version is unfortunately pretty nerfed and ugly, so I'm actually only putting the 360 version on the best list. There was way more detail that went into the 360 version. Again, even if I don't give two hoots about baseball, Nicktoons MLB makes baseball about as fun as it can be to me. Shame they put all this effort into, you know, a baseball game. And before we get to the number ones, just a couple of quick honorable mentions. Super Brawl Universe. I'm actually surprised Nickelodeon greenlit a game where all the Nickelodeon characters are beating the stuffing out of each other. Yes, it is indeed blatantly ripping off a certain other franchise, but I guess they changed just enough of the title to not be sued. But what I like about this game is a variety on display. If you want to fight Jenny from Teenage Robot against Aang from Avatar, or SpongeBob vs. Korra, if that's something you wanted to do for some reason, well, you can. Nicktoons Freeze Frame Frenzy. I'm impressed. I did not expect this kind of extra effort and fun out of a Game Boy Advance spin-off title. It's essentially Pokemon Snap for Nick, but very streamlined gameplay. This is a prime example of using the Nicktoons to their full advantage, turning the fairly slow-paced activity of photographing into something spirited, exciting, and energetic. Nicktoons Unite. This actually started the Nicktoons series, and later we got 3 more sequels. So Nicktoons Unite is the first game to combine Jimmy Neutron, SpongeBob, Danny Phantom, and Timmy Turner, and you can switch between the 4 of them at any time. The gameplay is pretty similar to what we talked about in Globs of Doom, except I found it much more slow and sluggish. The graphics have not aged well. The color scheme in particular on Nicktoons Unite really looks ugly to me. It has this weird, overwhelmingly green tinge to it, and something about it felt oddly oppressive to me. That and what is with these sound effects? Nowadays, Nicktoons Unite might be a fun enough game for little kids, but both kids and adults would probably enjoy the sequels more. But that's just me. Some people say they still really enjoy this one. Anyway, on to the number ones. And the number 1 worst Nickelodeon game is Nickelodeon Party Blast. Well, it's more like a trash bag explosion, as you're about to be both visually and audibly appalled. And the gameplay is bad enough to make you respect any Nicktoons participating a little less. To quote a friend, Nicktoons Party Blast is a lot like opening a box of chocolates, except the box is filled with flesh-eating venom beetles. You will likely feel sick and poisoned after playing, and even looking at it for too long may cause internal bruising. This game was so abhorrently boring and unpleasant that it actually made me miss the Turtles game. At least TMNT had personality. At least it felt in line with the Ninja Turtles world and had some lively character lines. So where to start?
But now, let the real games commence.
By that, of course, CAT actually means let the rear and ugly patience test of loading screens, ghastly gameplay, and barely playable confusing minigames commence. You can play as Satanica, Tommy, Zim, Eliza Thornberry, Otto, Reggie, Jimmy Neutron, and of course SpongeBob. And each one looks uglier than the last, and we're given essentially a swirl of toilet-quality minigames. Want to play a barely controllable careening wreck of a racing game collecting the same 1 to 2 items over and over? How about Squirty Splash, where you knock each other into what I can only assume by context is water and not radioactive sewage, while blaring car alarm, cat screeching sound effects into your ears. How about a miserably eye-squinto garbage pile of a basketball game, where half of the challenge is working out what ugly, shiny blob on screen is your character? How about the lost green, mucus-coloured Picasso painting here? Here we lay fiddly pipes with slow, unresponsive controls that is drawn out for yonks. And each one has the same annoying 3 to 4 sound effects blaring into your ears constantly. But But let's look even closer at these graphics, and I apologize in advance. I actually found myself feeling queasy looking at this rancid mess, let alone participating in this disaster. To start with, did they hire any of the original voice actors? When I'm around an entire party of Nickelodeon characters, I'd expect the occasional Zim or SpongeBob line. It doesn't have to be much, just something. I think they got Tom Kenny back as Dog, which is always a treat, but I barely recognize or even hear any other voices throughout this.
Why, I'll share half of it with you, Cat. You are a real dog.
You may notice a few things here. For one, the games drag on way too long without any variation. For two, it's a chaotic, complicated Picasso painting on screen. If you actually manage to convince someone to play this with you, good luck figuring out who is who or working through the clunky controls. As I said, spin-off party games can be done well, like SpongeBob's Lights Camera Pants, which was lively, quick, and put players right in the action of Bikini Bottom. Party Blast, on the other hand, feels lifeless. The characters look soullessly smacked together in 10 minutes, and nothing feels even remotely in context with anything any of the Nicktoons characters would be doing. This is such a disastrously boring game, I don't even like to review it, because I don't want to bore you by having you actually have to look at gameplay of it. So let's move on to something far more decent. And for the number one best Nickelodeon game, Nicktoons Battle for Volcano Island. Sound familiar? Well, it should. This is actually the sequel to Nicktoons Unite. And boy is it an improvement from the original. We've gone from jarringly loud and obnoxious colors to a far more calming, refreshing color palette that isn't overbearing to look at. We've got smoother controls, way more lively cutscenes, more interesting, varied enemies, and probably my favorite game settings and backgrounds of all the Nick games. So the story is epic. A crab summons 9 Nicktoons heroes to his island to help defeat an ancient enemy. The Margoo, this giant eldritch monster, it's actually kind of awesome.
This doesn't look like Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob, where are we?
Unfortunately, the Margoo uses its powers to scatter our heroes across the island. On the plus side, Danny Phantom and Spongy managed to stay together, so we start with them. Even in the tutorial, look at some of these beautiful yet simple skies and lighting. Check out these jungles. Doesn't this look way more varied, inviting, and beautiful than the bland corridors and brick tilings we got in so many other Nicktoons games? The cutscenes see a dramatic improvement, feeling so much more alive, and I found myself paying more attention and more invested in what Nicktoons were doing. In the end, my choice for the best ended up coming down to the feel of the game. Of all the Nicktoons games, I find Volcano Island the simplest. The characters look less awkward, and the colors feel a lot more pronounced than, say, Globs of Doom. This game is incredibly well remembered by a generation, and you can see why. Once again, the Nicktoons interacting feels like a full Nickelodeon special crossover, and it feels self-aware and not too pandering too. The controls are solid and responsive too. Spongy and Danny's jumping feels fluent and instantaneous. I also really like the layout of these alien worlds. It didn't feel as corridor-based as Globs of Doom, and I felt 4 Nick characters was more than enough. Even little comments between characters didn't feel too pandering or forced. And when I hear SpongeBob and Danny idly chatting with one another, it just puts a smile on my face.
Hey look, that's like the big robot thingy. Oh, we sure showed him. Yeah, we sure did, SpongeBob.
Even the game's setting and story felt a lot more unique to me and less pandering than any other Nicktoons games. A huge, alien-like eldritch horror is attempting to destroy a widely populated island for its own ends, using ooze to corrupt the inhabitants into its servants. And the monsters can range from sand creatures to plant beasts to crystal and rock monsters. And one level has you going through a hermit crab military camp to reach a huge dam in order to stop a gigantic sand monster from destroying it and giving the ooze to a huge outlet in the rest of the island. There's some things the game could have handled better, but personally, I found it was a solid concept. I also like that once again, you can have a family member or friend play alongside you at any time. Or you can just play it solo. It's always nice to have that option to play with others though. There's even a great hub area, Camp Castaway, where you can replay levels, play unlockable bonus stages, replay bosses, even observe monsters you've previously fought in a special zoo area. You can climb walls, pick up coconuts and rocks, you can float in air vents, you can even use turrets on bosses. This is a solid platformer that's a pleasure on the eyes and a pleasure to play. And just look at these boss battles. Unlike Nicktoons Unite, these bosses actually feel epic, yet still lighthearted and fun. I mean, watching the Nicktoons take on eldritch horrors just feels way more interesting than watching them take on random villains I've seen a million times before.
You look like a toy monster.
only nitpick with this game is the co-op AI is kinda weird. The AI characters following you mostly just keep out of your way and don't really do anything. So if you want a helping hand, you may have to ask a friend or a family member to back you up with another controller. Battle for Volcano Island was a simple but satisfying casual game experience to me. I can comfortably say it's my favorite Nicktoons game. Nowadays, when it comes to Nickelodeon games, the market actually seems to be relatively quiet. Apart from Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, which I'm actually really looking forward to. I wasn't able to find any console games post 2018, but when I look back, I think some of the Nickelodeon games turned out to give us some pretty solid 3D platforming, and some very genuine feeling crossovers. The good games are a bit like a good crossover cartoon episode. A little weird and awkward, but genuinely a novel experience. And if you've got your own choices for best and worst games, or you agree or disagree, feel free to leave your own thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Ow.